Welcome, everybody, to our February Mad About Art event. We're so thrilled to have Gary Emrich. I want to tell you that after I finish talking, I will mute everybody. And I also want to tell you that this and all of our programs now are recorded, and they takes about a week, and then they go on our website. I hope you have a chance. It's called madaboutartdenver.com. And so we have recorded things so you can watch it later. So I will turn the meeting over to our program chair, Hannah Lichtenfeld. Go ahead, Hannah.
Welcome, everyone. We've got another good turnout today. Thank you for joining, and thank you, Gary, for being with us today. I wanted to mention that if you have a question, please use the chat at the bottom of the screen and type your question in. If I can.
Oh, sorry, I have to have Hannah unmute herself, and Gary.
Okay, so if you have a question, if you type it into the chat, I'll take care of it during the program, or we'll have a Q&A at the end if it's a question that doesn't need to be answered during the program. Also, before we get started, I wanted to mention that we will have 2 programs in March, so watch your email. You'll be getting more information about them, but mark your dates. We have March 12th at 1 o'clock with Dr. Irv Kaufman, and he's giving a new interpretation of Vincent van Gogh's The Three Peasants. And then March 23rd at 1 o'clock, we'll have Michael Paglia, an art historian. He'll be presenting life as an art critic. So mark your calendars for those and be sure to put your questions into the chat. Thank you, Gary, for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Anne to introduce you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be the person to introduce Gary Emrich because I've known him and liked him for years. And we've had several personal collections, one being that the company of my late husband, Jack Emerson, the company was Seveco, was very receptive and encouraging and supportive of Gary. And Gary is one of the most creative and inventive and interesting people that I know. So I'm going to say, go up, take it, Gary.
Okay. All right. I'm going to share my screen here, and I hope somebody will tell me that they can see it. I'm going to do this.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I don't see anybody else now. This is a different kind of lecture with this kind of thing. So I'm just going to assume you're all there. Thanks for inviting me. I know, thanks to Hannah and Anne and Helen for organizing this. And thank you and your organization. I know that your organization, Mad About Art, until recently was a support group for the Denver Art Museum. And it shows your commitment to art and to artists and the study of art, that you've gone rogue and continue to meet and support artists and talk about art, and it's really wonderful. So I just got a few warm-up images here, and I'm gonna cover my work. I do a quick survey of my work. I'm in my studio. I think you can still see behind me is part of my archive of photographs and things. Then I'm going to allow a few minutes to walk around the studio, and I'll show you some piece that I'm working on, and then we will answer some questions after. I'll answer some questions after that. I'm a 4th generation Coloradan. My great-grandfather worked for the Guggenheims in New York, and he was shipped out here in 1884 to be the CFO of a smelting company called the Monarch Smelter. And then my grandfather on my mom's side was a homesteader, and he settled in Weld County and helped to found a town called Briggsdale. And my brothers and I still own some of the ranch that was his ranch. And so I say that because I think of myself as a real Westerner. And therefore, I think of myself as a Western artist in many ways. I was always a kid who made stuff. I was the kid who had cameras. I was the kid who took the family pictures. My father was a filmmaker in Denver started in the 50s. He first started as a sound man, and later he worked as a producer. And are these pictures moved forward? Did I move forward one?
Yep, you were in
Okay,
the
great.
Hi.
Great. All right. Just want to make sure because I can't really see everything. So I went to the University of Colorado. I have a BA in political science. I was going to go to law school. I was accepted to DU Law School, but then my life changed. I was a senior at CU. I was my last semester and I took a basic photography class, and I was in there and I thought, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. But I decided I'd give law school a chance. I told my parents I did that. I lasted 2 days. I went through the orientation, and then I pursued a career in photography and fine art photography, not knowing exactly what I was going to do. So I'm going to begin with 2 photographs that I took that are really important for me. This is 1977. This is downtown Denver. And it's a photograph that really illustrates my interest in pictures of other pictures. It's one of several things that unify all my body of work, which is, as you're going to see, is very process-based in photography. I will say that every photograph I'm going to show you from now on is a picture of another picture. And I saw this as a picture of a picture, right? Of course, the lines converge in the middle and frame this rectangle of this dumpster, and how it was the same size as the photographic frame, 35 millimeter photography. This is all, of course, analog photography, the old school 35 millimeter camera. I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to switch to digital, and I tell you when I switch to digital photography. You know, photography is really about editing in many ways, as opposed to painting or sculpture, where you begin with a blank thing and then you build something, or ceramics or many of the other art forms. Photography begins with the whole world, and then you decide, I'm going to subtract it and frame this and make this what it's about. And then later in that editing, you may go, hey, you know, I don't like these pictures. I'm going to get rid of them. I'm going to keep this picture. So photography is about editing in many ways, and editing is something that's really critical in my work. The next photograph I'm going to show you is I took in London in 1978. And why it was critical for me was that I liked the flatness of this. I liked the fact that most photography that we know has a foreground, middle ground, background, and a horizon. And so I noticed and I learned that if I photographed down and I flattened the space, I had a different way of seeing. And so this flatness is really, really important to me. This is much different. This is a year later. And I made a huge shift as a photographer into this. There's several things going on here that are very different than this. And I will say that the work that I'm going to show you, here's an example. It's a picture of a picture. It's a picture of a map. It's also looking straight down. I had a camera pointed down on this map, which was a National Geographic or atlas, and it's color. Also, in 1979, color photography was just being accepted as an art form. It had only been 5 years ago, before that, 1974, that the Museum of Modern Art and John Sierkowski curated a show of Eggleston's color photographs, which were a really groundbreaking moment in photography, that color could be accepted. Color had been thought of as the commercial and the advertising, and it was sort of crass, it was considered. So I learned color photography. Other thing different about this is this camera that I used, and I don't see me, but is a view camera. So it's a larger negative. You know, that view camera is that big camera with the black cloth that goes over your head. And so it had very fine detail. And so when I printed this photograph to 16 by 20, it was almost a trompe l'oeil, because it was an illusion of, was it really a map as you looked at it? This is another photograph in that series, spinach pasta throughout Central America. I learned color photography. I was in a workshop in Sun Valley, Idaho, and I'd lived there for a while, and I'd come back to Denver. I had applied to graduate schools where, and was in a group photography show. And Diane Vanderlip, who was just recently hired as the curator of modern contemporary art, bought this photograph from that show. I was 24 years old. It was, I mean, I couldn't believe it. When that sort of thing happens to an artist, particularly at a young age, it really makes them feel like, well, I must be doing something right. Diane told me for years, many times, that it was the first photograph she ever bought for the collection. They showed it, the art museum showed it twice, and I know it's still in the collection. I make sure it's still there. So then I went to graduate school at the Art Institute of Chicago, where my MFA was. And I went there because I was really interested in photography and video. So my career as an artist employs both of those things. I use video for some ideas that require movement and time and sound. And I use photography for the things that the ideas that it works for. This is the kind of material, the kind of camera that I first used at the Art Institute of Chicago. Very kind of primitive. What I liked about video was, and I rejected filmmaking, even though my dad was a filmmaker, was that film, I always felt, was kind of nostalgic, because you shot film and then you sent it to somebody and they processed it and then they sent it back to you and then you touched it. It was a really anal retentive kind of medium, and video was instantaneous and you could see it immediately, and it almost had a sense of being alive. And so I began to work in video, and I've always worked in video. Now, of course, they've combined. You know, very few people shoot filmmaking anymore. So I came back to Denver in 1982. I got a part-time teaching job like many people. I taught at Metro and at UCD, and I had the opportunity to do some really interesting work at the Colorado History Museum. And I was in a show called a biennial at the Art Museum in 1983. The Art Museum used to do biennials. The last one was in 94. This biennial was curated by Lucas Samaras, or judged by Lucas Samaras and Marcia Tucker, who was the new museum founder in New York. There are some famous Colorado artists in here. I'm standing there in the back row next to Jim Ballack, who's a really important photographer, and Bill Hayes is in here, and Stan Meyer. I showed a video piece in this exhibition. It was called Gray Zone. And Gray Zone was a video about men talking about sexuality. And in 1982, that was a pretty risky thing to talk about. I'd ask you to go look at it, and you'll see it's not exactly what you would think about that idea of sexuality. The Art Museum, after the show, acquired the videotape, very much like this. This is what it was. It was a 3/4 inch videotape. And it was the first video in the collection of the Art Museum. It's not the oldest piece in the Art Museum. That would be the Nam June Paik sculpture, but it's the first one. And I showed this picture because I like the story of when the Art Museum acquired the videotape. The registrar, who's sort of the gatekeeper at the door of the art museum, who, lets the work in, loans it, writes down, the receipt said video, 11 inches by 7 inches by 1.5 inches. And I thought that was really interesting because it really doesn't say anything about what the thing was about, but what else could you describe it as that? Then Gray Zone, this videotape, was shown at Blink at the Art Museum in 2011 with a collection of other work that is electronic based at the Art Museum. And many of you may have seen the show. When they showed Gray Zone, I was really happy, and they asked me how I wanted to be seen. I didn't want it to be projected like video is often. I wanted to be shown on that 20-inch monitor that it was really designed for. And because since it's this intimate discussion between the people in the video and the people watching it, it was really important for me that it be that. And video it's sort of lost that intimacy now. Because most video is really large and so it's much different. At the time, I was also working in photography. I've always worked in photography and video, as I said, at the same time. I started to work with a material called liquid light. And I have a 20-year collection of artwork that I'm going to show you some items of that involve this material. This is a black and white photographic material that is done in the darkroom. It's literally a photograph in a bottle. So this is Arches watercolor paper, 22 by 30 Arches watercolor paper. And in the darkroom, the red light and the trays and the water flowing, I would paint the paper with the emulsion and it would dry. And then I'd put it under enlarger, and then I'd make the image. And I was really interested in breaking many of the boundaries of photography. For one thing, photography usually has that nice crisp edge. And I used a house brush and I painted it to the edges and I let the feathery brush come through. And then as you notice, there are these familiar lines in it, because what I did was that I photographed all of this work, all of this black and white work I'm going to show you is photographed off of a television and with my 35mm camera there in front. So this was my second generation TV. My first one burned out in the mid-90s. So why did I do that? I did that because I did like the idea of combining video and photography. And what I wanted to talk about was that editing process. That what I would do is I had a VHS recorder. You remember VHS tape? I noticed that everybody in there will remember VHS tape from the people that I saw. And I would record commercials and documentaries and music videos and programs off of early cable and PBS programs, just randomly things. I would record them on tape, and then later I would go back and sort of remove the context of where it was and then photograph the object. So for instance, this picture of JFK. I'm really interested in that role of editors and how we see our lives, our culture, our country through their eyes. So this, in the 60s, his very famous news conferences, one day somebody decided to rebroadcast them, and somebody edited them to put them on a rebroadcast them, and they put commercials in between, and then they gave it to the cable company, and then the cable company put it on through to me, and then I recorded it and I made decisions. So all these ways in which the editing process of our imagery and our culture is a real driving force for this. This project really worked well with art history, for instance. All those art history programs you see on PBS, or Sister Mary walking through the Uffizi, or wherever. And I like to use art history as a reference. So this is a very large piece too, as you can see, 44 by 90, Christ in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, in which I took several paintings, well, 2 paintings, and I recreated the crucifixion with these 2 paintings. So I'm editing the content to create this. Repentant Mary Magdalene. It's the Titian Mary Magdalene and the Da Vinci Madonna. And, you know, it was one of those programs where the camera operator was told, okay, begin wide with the whole painting. Now start at the hand and move up. And now go to the face and then cut to this. And all of those things that happen and how we see this through that. I show this because Diane bought this for the art museum in 1990. So it's in the collection there too. And I'm always happy to have that happen for me. I have this sort of philosophy. As I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I did begin to use computers and other materials to make the subject matter that I would put on that old TV and then photograph. And so one of the things I thought of is, how could I find materials that this liquid photo emulsion that would work on? And then what kind of subjects would I use on the materials? So there used to be a little gallery at the Art Museum called the Close Range Gallery, which was in the Ponte, now Martin building, that showed regional and Colorado artists. And so and Jane Fudge was an associate curator of contemporary artwork in that department. And she curated a show of artists who used Egyptian imagery in their work. And here I had taken, I decided that what I would find sculptural reliefs, Roman, Greek, wherever, Egyptian. And then I would put it on flagstone. So this is flagstone with that material on it, with a photograph of a sculpture that would have been in stone. That let the materials dry the thinking. Later I used eyeglasses. I liked them a lot because I got them on eBay, you know, and what else would I put on this kind of, you know, 1930s eyeglasses that scientists would use except, you know, a nerve cell. I like the fact that the eyeglasses had a scale that said, okay, they are all the same size. So I would put 2 things up, the monstrous scale of the nebula and the wave, and I put them together because they were kind of talking about the same elements, but in just a different scale. I show this work because, I want to see this. Okay, I show this work because I never got to show it. In 2000, I found this collection of slate roofing tiles in a junkyard. And I thought, well, what shall I put on these? So I thought, well, I'm gonna find some films of imploding buildings that were being demolished, like the Trump Casino 2 days ago. And so I did these images of imploding buildings, and I put them on the slate tiles as if they had been the roofing tiles. This piece is hanging in my house, for instance, but I never showed these because I finished them and then 9/11 happened. And I thought, I really can't show these because everybody's going to think this is about 9/11. So they've just kind of been sitting around all these years. And then another object that I like to use was paint brushes. I found these on eBay. Now, who buys old, used, rusty, bad paintbrushes off of eBay? Lots of artists do. So I would be bidding against the same artists to get these paintbrushes. So, and of course, what worked on the paintbrushes for me were waterfalls because of, you know, the shape of the water and the water coming off the brush. So I did a series of pieces with that. Niagara Falls is a subject that I've done in several art pieces. I've never been there. I'm going to go someday. We're all going to get to go somewhere someday. But Niagara Falls is something that I did a lot in several art pieces. And now I'm going to move into the sort of digital world, and I'm going to show reference this piece that I did at the Art Museum in 2011, which I was really happy to get to do. Again, this is a video piece. Maybe some of you saw this. It was called Contact. Christoph and Gwen Chansett had saw it in my studio, and they said, we want to show this in the Fuse Box gallery. And of course, I was thrilled with the opportunity to do that. It began with these 3 photographs outside the Fuse Box, which I created. And the subject of this whole piece was about the Apollo space program, which is a subject that's really interesting to me. I mean, our country is in turmoil in many ways, but I still can't believe that we can land a spacecraft in 8 million miles away on the surface of Mars in a space the size of a parking lot, like happened yesterday. And so for me, growing up in the 60s, the Apollo space program was just everything for me. So I've done a series of pieces about it, and this was the first one. And I used these photographs as an entry. They were actually photographs that were my father's production stills for his motion picture company that I scanned and then made these photographs, which I like very much. They have a really family reference to them. And then as you walked into the space, there was a projection of the moon. And I did something with the moon that was different. I animated it so it rotated. And most people didn't really think about it very much as they walked in. A few people noticed it and mentioned it to me, but the moon doesn't rotate, it's stationary. And so I rotated the moon as part of this piece. And then projected on the wall was this video, which I had shot in my garden over a couple of years, of bees pollinating my flowers. It's really nice when you get to do things like pictures of your flowers, which is a fairly cliche thing. And hopefully I got to elevate that into something else than that. The audio of this video piece was the audio of Apollo 15 descending and then landing on the moon, and the discussion between Houston and the spacecraft of 50 feet, 5 pounds, 10 seconds left. It was all about that descending onto the surface of the moon. I also made these, this piece was very colorful, very gaudy, very blurry, because I used a different kind of camera. This is the camera I used to make Contact. It was a pinhole surveillance camera. So the camera itself is the object on the left. It's about the size of a lipstick tube. And I would get right on top of the bees as they were pollinating within an inch, as close as I possibly could. And then this camera transmitted to the basement of my house. It was just at the edge of where it could transmit. And because of that, it often had some distortion or interference, and all of that was a reference to what we saw from the moon, which was a lot of interference and distortion. And so this is how I did that. I really enjoyed this piece. I got to show it at Robichon Gallery, which I need to mention is a contemporary art gallery in Denver. Most of you know it. I've shown at Robichon since 1989. Jim and Jennifer have been tremendously supportive of me. They've shown video installations for years. It's a great honor to get to show at the best gallery in Denver. This was at Robichon. I showed the piece at the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center in 2016. I had a solo exhibition there. I've done 2 other pieces. It was always intended to be a trilogy. The second one is called Splashdown. I completed that in 2016. And it's about Chappaquiddick and the Apollo 11 splashdown and the relationship between them. And then the third one I just completed. I've been working on it for 2 years, and it's called Dibs. And it's about us planting the flag on the moon and the sort of manifest destiny of America to plant the flag on the moon. And so I'll find somebody to show it sometime soon, I hope. So we'll see. So, and now I'm going to talk about how are we doing here? Oh, good. We got plenty of time. I'm going to talk about water. And water is the thing that is the driving force in most of my work. It's the thing that makes me a Westerner. Water in Colorado is different than anywhere else because the water begins here and it leaves. It starts and it goes. We're the only state where all the water leaves. It doesn't flow through the state. There's a tiny bit of the Green River in the upper corner of the state. Otherwise, our history is basically watching water leave. I've done several pieces about water. You saw some paintbrushes earlier. And the last 2 projects I'm going to show you are some large color photographs that involve the one thing I really like about water, and that is that it really is a commodity. I know there's some people, I'm sure there are people in this group who know more about this than I do, but the Denver Water Board is probably the most important non-elected political entity in Denver. They make decisions about water and who gets it and who's had it. And water is bought, it's sold, its rights are bought and sold. And for me, I'm really interested in bottled water currently as something that's really important. Because for one thing, in the United States, we use 50 billion bottles of water a year. 50 billion bottles of water a year at about 1,000 times the cost of 8 ounces of water. And so I made these 2 projects about water. The first one uses the labels. I'm going to show you that first. And then the second project uses the wrapping around cases of water. So this photograph illustrates that. You buy a case of water and it's got the plastic wrapping that holds the case together. I did a piece called Firewater. And Firewater was my really attempt to talk about the West and Western art. And what I did was I discovered that in the 70s, a liquor distribution company in Kentucky called Ironstone made these liquor decanters. You remember liquor decanters? Maybe you have them, maybe your uncle had them, maybe your grandfather had a liquor decanter of Elvis Presley and cars and train engines and stuff. Well, here was this collection of very cliched, very obvious Western figures, the cowboy. And what I did is I built these backgrounds in the computer using the water bottle labels, in this case, Deep Rock. And then I put the most sort of cliche images, photographs of the West that were in calendars and picture books. And I built them in the computer. And then I made these portraits of these Western figures. The cavalry scout with pure aspen pure. Here's a photograph of how I made them. That's my view camera on the left there. And then I literally put them on what would be called a sweep table in the photo world. And so there was no Photoshop, there was no messing around here. It made a very large photograph that that then I would have scanned, and then I could print large in digital photography. I sheriff with Ice Mountain Spring. I thought of these guys as kind of like the guardians of our water, you know, that they were protecting our water. They were securing our water from those nasty Californians and Arizonians, I guess. The frontiersmen with El Dorado Springs. I've been collecting bottled water paraphernalia for many, many years. And I'm always looking for more of it that I don't have too. So here's Molly Brown. Doesn't look anything like our Molly Brown or Debbie Reynolds. And of course, this 70s very much cliche depiction of Western figures that the Ironstone made. This was the only one that I could find that was in any way appropriate for a depiction of a woman. The rest of them were the camp follower, the prostitute, the dance hall girl, the cleaning lady, the washerwoman. Molly Brown was really the only one I could do as a female figure. A prospector. And then the photographer, which these had these little labels to describe who they were. It's not like I made up these names. It literally did say Molly Brown. And this said William H. Jackson, which of course is a very important history person in the history of Colorado photography. He lived here for about 22 years and was instrumental in photographing the West. And behind him is the Mount of the Holy Cross, which, and it was suggested that he was the first photographer to photograph the Mount of the Holy Cross. So he's on Ozarka Springs water. Here's a gallery view of them from that show in Colorado Springs that I did. But this project started originally from this piece. This was the first liquor decanter that I found, and I'd gone to an estate sale in Hilltop here in Denver, and yes, in the basement was shelves and shelves of liquor decanters that somebody had saved and collected, and I was just like, oh, these are fantastic. So I bought a few, and one of them was this rodeo clown. And I had him for a really long time. I even had him on my mantle, and it was kind of creepy. I mean, I admit he's a little creepy. So he's very gaudy and big, and big in terms of his look. So I put it on this really gaudy background, and this was the first one I did. And I showed him, and I'm happy to say that Eric Paddock, a curator of photography at the Art Museum, bought this photograph in 2011. He's never shown it. He's always told me that he really wanted to go and like put it on a cart and just kind of drive it around the museum and like leave it there for a while, just because it would shock people in many ways. So that's again a really nice thing to have that piece in the collection too. The other project that I did that many of you may have seen was called All Consumed. And this is a piece, and I'm back doing these pictures. I hadn't done any for a couple of years because I really wanted to finish dibs. So All Consumed is, these are landscape photographs. And I will say, I want you to think as you look at these, how much they are like that spinach pasta throughout Central America, which I also thought those map photographs were landscape photographs. These are landscape photographs made from the wrappings of bottled water that are put, and I make these collages. I do them on a light table, right? And then on top of the collages of water bottle packaging, I put these objects, which are blister packs. And blister packs are that thing in packaging when you go to the store, and they're, often on toys or tools or, housewares, that have the object, in as the shape of it. And so I took these and I put them on top of the bottled water, the bottled water labels, and I filled the blister packs with water. And so what I was trying to do was I wanted to talk about the first things we throw away in consumer products, the wrappings. And I wanted to make them the object of desire and beauty by elevating them into this, making them a work of art. If you notice also, they're sort of floating in a white space, very much like that liquid light work that I did, where I wanted to remove the squareness of photography, that hard edge. And that was a conscious choice. I often, and I still try to do this, work with a foreground and a middle ground and a background element in this work. And I make them as a vertical, which is very unusual in landscape photography, because landscape photography usually are wide and with a horizon. And so I consciously made them vertical. And I did that because I was really interested in Chinese scroll landscape painting. And so this is in many ways a reference to that, because they're that same imaginary landscape where there's a real foreground and a middle ground and a background. And so that's where what I was thinking when I was making these. They're very large. This one is 50 inches. I print them several sizes. What I really like is that, as I said, they're shot on a light table. So the light comes from underneath, it comes up through the packaging, through the blister pack and the water, and it diffuses and it makes imagery that you can't do with anything except photography. Uh-oh, okay. This is a picture of me in Prague in 2018 looking for water bottle packaging. I search for it all the time, and my wife is very, allows me to go into weird convenience stores and to see if they have any water bottle packaging I don't have. And so I've used European water bottle packaging. A piece I'm going to show you in a few minutes is from Turkey that I'm working on right now. I'll go to a halal cart or a hot dog stand in New York and say, hey, do you mind if I take the plastic wrapping that your bottled water is in? And they'll go, why? And I'll say, I'm an artist. And they go, oh, okay. So sometimes I'll give them $5, but it's something I do a lot, try to accumulate this material. This is German water bottle packaging, for instance. And here's the work, couple of pieces that were shown at a show I had at Robichon in 2018. And then I was really blessed and honored to be in the New Territory show of landscape photography that was at the Art Museum, also in 2018, that Eric Paddock curated. And the marketing department at the Art Museum really liked my imagery, and I got this giant poster on the parking garage, and my photograph was on the invitation, and so I was quite honored because it was an impressive group of photographers in this show, and for me it was really the ultimate opportunity in terms of the sort of people that were showing and their approach to photography, which was very much like mine. I like that Eric Paddock called my work toxic beauty. Because that's really, what I'm trying to address, as well as the commodity of it. These were very big. These were 6 foot tall photographs, because I shoot them with a 4x5 camera again, and have them drum scan. For those of you who are photographers, they are 1.9 gigabyte files. So they're very large that I can work with. This is an Italian water bottle packaging. And this one, I used Pellegrino as the water. And I had to let it sit a couple of days because it was too bubbly, and I got to the point where it was the right amount of bubbles, and I took the photograph. These photographs are really labor intensive. They take a lot of time for me to feel like they're right and I'm ready to photograph them. I have to decide what packaging I use. There's a lot of tweezers and Q-tips used in getting them ready to photograph. Taking things, cutting things, moving things. Some of them take a really long time. They take a long time to make, and because I'm very precise about them, and I have a real interest in making them perfect. So that is my story. And I've allowed a lot of time to do something else here. This is my website where you can look at my photographs. And I would encourage you to look at the video, see what contact looks like, or splashdown, or the gray zone. There's a videotape there called Too Perfect to Ignore that was also in the art museum. And so I encourage you to do that. And let me see if I can get out of here. Okay, so Helen.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna bail on here and go to my iPad. Everyone, I'm gonna join this meeting. I'm gonna quit this so that we don't have feedback.
And there might be a few minutes of.
Yeah, just a second here. Let's see what happens. We're gonna hope this works here. So you should be letting me into the meeting.
Yep, you're in.
You see me? Okay, I'm gonna bail on this one.
And I'm gonna make you, I gotta see where you're, are you there, Gary? Let's see here. I admitted him. Where is he?
All right, can you hear me?
I can, oh, here you are with your iPad. Yeah, I need to make you a co-host. I'm doing that right now. Okay. Very good.
All right. So this is where I was seated very quickly. This is my archive of printed material. I have quite a lot of things that I use that, I cut out and I save and I scan and I keep in there. And then so I'm going to rotate around here and I'm going to look up and here's my studio. Currently, I'm going to show you right here some work. I'll stop as I go. I want to get there. I make these little test prints of the work and I hang it up and I can kind of reference it. I have that on this wall. And then over here is a lot of water bottle packaging. So, and I just kind of laid it out on the floor a bit just so that you could see. I'm limited by the tones and the colors of the water bottle packaging, and I try really hard to. They're very green and blue, of course, and then I have boxes of blister packs. you know, that I've saved for years. All different shapes and sizes. And then this, for instance, is a pile of European water bottle packaging that I've been working with just recently. Do that. And then this is my current piece that I'm working on. My view camera pointed straight down, my light table, and there is my current piece that I'm just trying to decide if it's right. It is actually Turkish water bottle packaging, and Dubai. A good friend of mine who I play tennis with used to travel a lot for Microsoft, and he would he brought me back some amazing material. I always tell people, well, if you see anything, let me know. So I encourage you also someday when we get to travel, if you get any great water bottle packaging, let me know. I love the fact that even in the Turkish one, there's a mountain, you know. So because everybody knows that all the good water comes from the mountains. So now, Helen, how do we, if we have any questions, I'll come over here and sit, and I'll flip this back around.
There you go.
And if anybody has a question,
I
I'll be
do.
happy to answer it. Yes.
I was going to do a gallery view. I guess everybody can do what they want
Okay.
on here. And Gary, so Phil.
I'm fascinated by your water depictions. I like contemporary art and non-representational and so forth. However, the world seems to be awash in waste of that kind, the oceans in particular, and I'm wondering if you have cranked any of that thought into your artwork.
Well, I will say that I feel somewhat guilty that I have to accumulate this stuff to make the work. And so I feel that I'm kind of talking about the waste in some ways in an artist statement, but I haven't really thought, I mean, I know several artists and photographers who talk about the volume of waste that's out there. So it's something that when I first started to do this project, I wasn't as directed towards making a political statement, but the more I've done it, the more I've thought that it was a very interesting political thing to talk about the waste. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Any other questions?
Gary, thank you so much. It's Hannah here.
Hi, Hannah.
I just wanted to ask, I'm so fascinated by what you're doing. Do you have a show coming up? I would look forward to seeing your next exhibit.
I have a show. I'm in a show at DU at the Vicki Myron
Oh,
Gallery
I'm
next
familiar.
month. Yeah, I'm going to show two of the big all-consumed pieces. It's actually a show that Jeffrey Shamus, the gallerist, and then Dawn Fodness, who's an artist, have gotten of artists who do landscape work, and particularly about the horizon, which I find really interesting because so much of my work is not about the horizon, but I mean, it sort of is. So I'll be showing that. It's in March through the end of summer. I'm also in a show that opens up at the end of this month in San Francisco. There's a museum actually at San Francisco International Airport that I didn't even know. And they contacted me, and I'm showing 4 pieces in one of their rooms at that museum. And it opens up on the 23rd of February, and it's up through June. And I'm really excited to do that. He saw my work at the art museum. The curator of that museum saw my work at the art museum, and then It's been published in a couple of publications in the last couple of years. So I don't know if I'll get to see this show. I was in a show in Chicago last March that I never saw. It was only online in the end. So it's just the world we live in. So, but yes, the Vicky, there'll be 2 really nice pieces at the Vicky Myron Gallery.
Oh, I'll
So,
definitely get to that one. I
okay,
go
thanks.
there. I go there often. They put together some good shows there. So
They
I'm
do.
glad, I'm
Yeah.
glad you're there. Plus, it'll be something in person. So that'll be
I know. I think I can go.
right, right.
So, yeah.
Gary,
Ingrid, go ahead.
This is a very obtuse question. My parents were in the Royal Air Force
Mhm.
during World War II, and they were photographers. And my dad would go and take the photographs, but my mom worked in the laboratory creating. And she has this notebook that is the whole process, because she had to train herself.
Mhm.
I don't want to throw this notebook away.
Right.
I mean, it's quite phenomenal. She was absolutely brilliant
Hmm.
to be able to, to create this for herself
Right.
immediately. You join the RAF and this is what your job is to
Wow.
do this. So I just don't know where to take it. I can ask at the museum, but it can't be thrown away.
No, it can't be thrown away. I mean, the Cardinal History Museum, even though it's, from Britain, they have quite a photographic collection and photographic materials. If you contacted Eric Paddock at the Art Museum, he would probably, because he just loves to look at stuff like that. Nancy Benson knows how much he loves to look at stuff like
I will.
that. So he would appreciate seeing that at the very least. So,
Okay, I'll just call Eric.
Yeah.
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 He's
Yeah.
great. He's great.
Yeah.
And this was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hate to do this, but when it comes to found photographs, I'm going to go back around. I have another thing that I have, this is something I was working on. I really decided I wouldn't show you, but since you mentioned it, I have 10,000 photographs that were from a dead newspaper file that were from the 20s through the 50s.
Oh.
And I have them all cataloged and organized. And I've tried to figure out what to do with them. So many artists use found photographs, and I just didn't want to jump in and do the same thing. But I love to look at them, and I love to think about what I'm going to do with them someday. So yeah, and there are 10,000 of them in boxes right there in my studio. So
interesting. So interesting. So do we have any other questions from Nancy?
Yes, Gary, I love the presentation. Great job. I'm interested in your water ones. Did you only use the wrapping, or did you ever add anything else to it? Look, there was an elk in one of them, and I wondered if that was something that was added.
well, the elk is actually for it's an East Coast. Nestle's owns Arrowhead, Ice Mountain, Echo Springs, and oh gosh, I can't remember the 4th one. And yes, the elk was in one.
It was.
So I do have, and that's a fair question, because I do have a process where I guarantee that at least one piece is bottled water. But I have used, for instance, a piece of like a vegetable wrapping, or sometimes it's when you go buy grapes at King Soopers, and the wrapping of it might have some landscape element. So I guarantee every one of them has some bottled water in it. But between you and me, occasionally I'll put something else in it. So, but the elk was in that East Coast brand that was owned by Nestle. So, yeah.
Great job.
It's amazing.
All right, any other questions? Well, Gary,
Thank
we
you.
just can't thank you enough. It was really wonderful.
Good, I'm glad.
Since you were talking about photography, I wanted to recommend strongly this exhibit that is downtown on, down on Santa Fe at the Center for Visual Arts. It's part of the Metropolitan Metro. And this is it's from a woman named Nali Maholi. And this has traveled around the world. We're the last place. There's a parking area right next to it on Santa Fe. It's like 965 Santa Fe. And there was nobody in there when I went in a couple of weeks ago. It's here till March 20th. Big high ceilings, very safe for you to walk around, but it's very unusual. And I would highly recommend it.
Helen, can you spell that name, please, so we can do a little research?
Yeah, it's Zanele, Zanele, last name Muholi, Muholi. And they have, a young woman showed me around, but you yourself can just walk around and look, but highly recommend that. I don't know if you've seen it, Gary, but
No, it's on my list. This is actually, March is the month of photography in Colorado. It's a big, there are multiple exhibitions all over photography. It's a biannual thing that happens, and that is one of the highlights is that show. It's really something, I understand. So I'll be there soon.
oh,
So,
great. Thank you so much.
yeah.
So thank you, everybody. We have 2 programs coming up in March. And also want to remind you that this is recorded and it's on our website, madaboutartdenver.com, so you can look it over again.
Great.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you for being there. Thank you for being there, everyone.
Have a
Bye.
wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.